What's up, peers, and welcome to the World Crypto Network, here for the next part of the series, Open Source Everything, where we talk about, well, all the amazing software that is here happening in the Bitcoin space. We have a bunch of fascinating tools that help us to use sound money to its most prolific use cases. And of course, one of these giant smart contracts, just financial awesome software on Bitcoin is, of course, the Lightning Network, which provides you instant and free, or pretty much really ridiculous cheap payments. And it is a phenomenal user experience all through, and a really huge scaling and privacy improvement for Bitcoin. So, a bunch of cool stuff to talk about here. And today we're going to focus the discussion on how to best manage the Lightning Network channels and how to do the liquidity management on your Lightning Network node. A fascinating topic because it includes all the complexities of the Lightning Network and the game theory of finance. It's brilliant. Thank God I'm not alone here today. We're joined by Billy Garrison. What's up?
Hey Max, how's it going?
Well, fantastic. I'm really looking forward to talking to you today. So maybe Billy, to your background a bit. How did you get into Bitcoin and especially the Lightning Network?
So it's not your typical kind of, I guess there isn't a typical path to get into this stuff, but started out, my background's in geology, and as part of that, I did a 1-year course in geographic information systems, GIS, doing spatial data management and analysis. And as part of that training, there was a couple of programming classes. I realized I like programming, and then kind of around the time I graduated, coming up on a couple years ago, I started to look into things I could do with the programming and stumbled across Bitcoin. So I've been going down the rabbit hole ever since. And then about a year ago, I got into Lightning Network stuff and started playing with that fancy new shiny technology. And I liked this idea of programmable money, and kind of for the past year, I've been really trying to focus just on Bitcoin and the Lightning Network, because there's not a whole lot of focus on that area. A lot of it's on the kind of noisy peripheral blockchain stuff. So yeah, I've been kind of focusing on Lightning Network mostly, because I feel like that's the area that is probably going to provide the most value to the ecosystem in the near future. And like I say, there's not that many people focusing on it, so it just felt like a good fit for me to work on those skills and eventually get to the point where I can do something of value. Not quite there yet, but starting to play around with making some Lightning apps and things like that.
Oh yes, that's awesome. So it's really nice to see now that we have to ask this the question different, right? It's not just how did you get into Bitcoin? That's always the first step, but now it's also the Lightning Network, right? We now have this entire new experience on top of Bitcoin that is ever more complex and nuanced, and opens up entire new avenue here in the rabbit hole. And it's fascinating, right? It doesn't really let you go. So you said that you've tinkered around with a couple of Lightning apps so far. So what was your experience so far? What have you built with the Lightning Network?
So in terms of building, it's been a lot of just playing with little scripts and like I said, I don't have a software development background, so my Lightning applications are very rudimentary so far. Kind of like trying to write a paywall feature from scratch, things like that. The one thing that I have been kind of working on that is definitely not ready for public release or anything like that, but using my background in the GIS stuff, I put together a little interactive web map that it's kind of like the y'alls.org paywalled articles, but instead of an article, you can pay to put a little drop a pin on the map, and then other users can view the map and they can pay to unlock what that pin has to say. So, or maybe click, unlock the, make a payment, and then instead of a pin, it might turn into like a path, like a hiking trail that takes you to a cool, waterfall or something like that. so that's kind of the main project that I was working on. And I like playing around with other people's labs. Like yesterday, or yesterday or the day before, me and Nodl and Not were playing the new Lightning chess game that Lightning Qual just put out. So it was pretty cool. You load up your wallet with Satoshis, and then you basically play chess. But if you want to like add more time to your timer, you can make like a micropayment to the other user. Or if you want to, undo your turn. So it's like chess with a little twist, using Lightning Network payments to unlock those extra features. So it's just a little tinkering here and there, nothing big or usable yet. But like I say, I'm getting to the point where I'm soon going to be able to release some of the stuff and put together little C Lightning plugins and things like that probably won't gain huge usage, but if it helps a few people do something, then yeah, it'll be good to give back like that.
Oh, awesome. And I really think that the cool thing with Lightning Network is that we have the opportunity now to easily build some financial applications, right? You said you don't really have that much software engineering background and skills, but yet it's still possible for you to easily create or tinker around with your little paywall, right? And create the most basic apps from being self-taught. And let's remember that this is still really, really early days. This is reckless as hell, right? We still don't have half of the tools that we need to build something decent, and definitely not the experience. So we still have a bunch of improvements to go and experiences to learn before we can build out the really interesting and cool Lightning applications. But already, only 1 year after mainnet launch, whenever that was, we are already building fantastic applications that are really, really fun. So I see it the same here. I personally don't have any at all programming or coding skills, but still you can with some easy scripts, you can have some fantastic concepts, or just thinking through all this stuff theoretically, right? Not even applying it in code really helped me a lot to conceptualize how this technology works. It's fascinating. It's extremely interesting. But you also mentioned, right, that one key thing that you have to do is fund your Lightning Network node. Maybe wait, before we talk about funding, something that you asked me just before we got online, and that's also a really interesting question that you now have to ask. With the Bitcoin blockchain, we pretty much only have Bitcoin Core. Right, you're running Bitcoin D, hopefully the latest version, right? But it is the consensus implementation. However, with the Lightning Network, we don't have that, right? There are the basics of Lightning technologies, the bold specifications, open source standard, and there are different implementations that adhere to these specifications. 3 of them, Eclair, developed by the Async team in France, C Lightning, developed by the Blockstream team, and the LND client, developed by Lightning Labs. First and foremost, they have a bunch of different open source developers. And there could be many more. So I personally, the Nodl right here is running LND. But Benny, Billy, what specification, what implementation of the Lightning Network are you running, and why?
I'm using C Lightning, and the main reason, I guess, is because back a year ago, when I first started trying the Lightning stuff out, there was this, I think was still at the time when Lightning Labs was saying, like, don't use this on mainnet. This was before the reckless hashtag, right? This was like, do not use this, you will lose money. But then from the C Lightning side of things, they started to say, well, hey, look, you can buy a t-shirt from Blockstream. So I was like, all right, I'll use their implementation and, try to, even if I lose my $20 or whatever, I'll still see if I can buy a t-shirt on, on Lightning Network. And so C Lightning was kind of the one that they were, they were aiming to receive the payments, right? They were helping. I don't know if it was the Blockstream people who put a tutorial or not, but there was like a short little tutorial on how to open up a C Lightning channel with Blockstream and buy a sticker or whatever. So I followed that, and kind of ever since I've just been running that node, and I find that most of the kind of community-led stuff is on the L&D side of things. And so if I were to get in today, I might have gone that route. But back then it was kind of C Lightning was the main implementation that was actually being used to spend real funds at the time. And so, yeah, like I said, I just kind of stuck with it. And at one point I thought about jumping ship and going to L&D because of the extra tools that are out there. But kind of as a personal challenge, I thought I'd keep going with the C Lightning. And I feel like you need to have the balance where, if everyone jumps ship and goes to L&D, then no one will be left doing stuff on C Lightning. So I want to try to, be able to help out there. And the other thing is that I like the fact that my node's been online for like pretty much a full year now. So that's it's a pretty cool thing that I don't want to take offline. But yeah, I do plan on actually starting to run an L&D node here within the next couple weeks, just so when I do start making these little applications or whatever, I can try to make them so that they're platform agnostic. You can run it on whatever node you're running, and it'll help you do what you need to do.
Yes, that is awesome. And I agree. The really sad thing and the cool thing about Lightning Network is that it is so reckless, right? And especially in the early days. And there was this little still incentive, right? You had to prove your cojones, and you did that by buying some stickers, right? And so. Although Bitcoin is the ultimate sound money, right, and that it decreases your time preference, so that you can save for the future, you're incentivized to hodl your Bitcoin. Lightning Network is so ridiculously cool that you just are going to spend your Bitcoin eventually, because you just have to get that reckless sticker. That's just how things are. And every time that there's a new sticker pack coming out, you just have to spend a couple thousand Satoshis. That's how it goes. But these are precious Satoshis, right?
Yeah,
so it's tricky. but yeah, I definitely remember the early days where I made my very first Lightning payment back in on-chain, or mainnet, I mean, on December 4th, and 2017. I remember this day so much because I completely freaked the fuck out, because it didn't work at all. It was command line, was buggy as hell. 20 failed payments before it worked, but eventually it did. And then when it worked, it was magic. Right, so it is this entire new rabbit hole that started, and again, only 1 year, but it's crazy what we can build in 50,000 blocks. And we definitely have built something beautiful here.
Yeah, it is impressive how fast it's come along. I think part of the reason for that is that you have these 3 different main teams working on their own implementation, which kind of, there's probably that like friendly competition to ship things a bit faster. The other thing is that, because these things are still in beta, and everyone kind of knows that they're using it recklessly. It's not like kind of Bitcoin core development where everything has to be perfect and flawless, right? If someone loses $20 on Lightning Network, like, we warned you. So that enables people to just put all these cool features in, try them out, find the bugs, fix them, and keep moving forward in like a real live mainnet. Whereas compared to what we're used to with Bitcoin Core, that just doesn't happen.
Yes, very true, right? That's cool with scaling in layers, is that we can start the ossification of the base layer, right? That we can make the base layer as hard and unchanging as possible, that it is no longer prone to change in consensus rules, right? So that we have certainty that the sound money will not, or the rules defined in the sound money will not be changed at the whim of some arbitrator dictator. So we are going to have this unchanging consensus to build upon, but then on the higher level protocols such as Lightning Network, maybe even higher than Lightning Network, right? Some Chaumian eCash servers on top of Lightning or whatever, right? Then we can have many more nuances and move fast and break things approaches that still are far from from that, but still we can be much more explorative in how we utilize this financial software, and that's fantastic. For example, right, having the 3 different implementations, but maybe now let's get a bit now into the heart of what we want to talk about today, and that is the liquidity management, right? So first and foremost, when you start your first Lightning Network node, initially you have to fund it with a regular on-chain transactions, and then you have to open payment channels with a funding transaction. So Billy, could you maybe go into the details of how this funding transaction works and how it looks on the base layer blockchain?
Sure. So the actual funding transaction, it's a regular Bitcoin transaction, and it pays to a multi-signature address. So if I'm opening a channel with Max, then basically if I want to lock in, 1 million Satoshis into the payment channel, then I pay 1 million Satoshi into a multi-sig that Max and I have the 2 keys for. So it's a 2 of 2 multi-sig. One thing that needs to be done before we can actually broadcast that out to the Bitcoin blockchain, like the problem with just that funding transaction on its own is that if I were to put those 1 million Satoshis into the multi-signature account, then Max doesn't have to sign the transaction spending that output. So he could hold my funds ransom and basically say, I only agree to sign this if, you give me half of them. So the way that it's actually, that problem solved is that essentially the way of your balance in the payment channel is updated is with something called commitment transactions. And it's kind of like a commitment transaction is when you're changing the balance in the channel. So you're, instead of that 2 of 2 multi-sig spending X amount to me and X amount to, or Y amount to Max, it's a new amount. So let me back up. Think of it like writing checks from a checking account. So initially we'd have 2 checks for 1 million Satoshis to me and 0 to Max. And the commitment transaction is me and Max both signing those 2 checks before broadcasting the funding transaction. So now with that funding transaction broadcast, I know for sure that even if Max disappears, I have those commitment transactions or transaction to broadcast. And then I'll get my 1 million Satoshis back. And so then to update the balance of the channel, basically Max and we write 2 new checks, one to me for 800,000 Satoshis, one to Max for 200,000 Satoshis. And then we rip up the old checks. So, we use cryptography to guarantee that those old checks can't be spent. And so now if either of us broadcasts an old state of the channel, we have these mechanisms in place that we're guaranteed that if we see them do something bad, we can say, no, here's the real state of it. Here's my proof. So, let's do it this way instead. And it's all enforced by the Bitcoin blockchain, script rules. So if there is any disagreement between Max and I, or if Max disappears, then we use that Bitcoin script to actually enforce, like, no, this is I get the final say kind of thing.
Yes, very well explained, right? And it is kind of tricky to first get your head around, but eventually it will make sense, right? But we need to get over and over this and accumulate this information to try to make sense of it. And right, the cool thing is that with Lightning, we kind of have to fund this entire endeavor, right? We have to first put Bitcoin on the line in a hot wallet so that we can use these funds every single second, right? We want to have these instant payments. So we need to be in a hot wallet. And then we need to communicate with the route or with the channel, with the Lightning channel partner or peer. Because we want to, as you said, update the current state of this channel, right? We want to make these Lightning Network transactions. And for this, we have to communicate. So initially, you connect to your peer just to have encrypted communication, right, with the public key. And then you open you create a one-sided funded opening transaction. There are theories about how we can do dual-sided funded transactions, so that both I and Billy, let's say each of us put down, or I put down 1 million Satoshis and he puts down 5 million Satoshis in the payment channel. Then we could do this as well. But currently, it's only a single-sided or one-sided, mono-sided funding. And this then means that I provide some inputs in the Bitcoin funding transaction blockchain that will be broadcasted on the blockchain, and we generate the output, which is the 2 out of 2 multi-signature, right? Which then has both of our public keys that need to sign a valid transaction so that it can be spent again. This is the script that we lock the Bitcoin up. The smart contract, so to say, is first and foremost a 2 out of 2 multi-sig. But then also, as a second condition, it is after a certain time period, let's say 144 blocks, which is roughly 1 day. After this time period, it could be only one signature to move the money out of this Lightning Network or out of this multi-signature payment. So we have here several conditions that can spend the Lightning Network payment. And then a third condition that can close or spend out of the script would be the revocation transaction. So if I have a secret that Billy has created, so he makes up a random secret, and when I have this secret plus my own signature, then I can spend the money as well. So this is going to be the third condition, the revocation transaction or the punishment transaction. That in the case where Billy tries to steal from me by publishing a old channel state, I can prove with the little secret, the revocation secret, that this is an old state, and then take all the money from Billy. So these are the 3 different outcomes or signature or release scripts that are possible in a Lightning Network funding transaction.
Yeah, and to add to that, like you said, kind of repeating this stuff multiple times will help people kind of get their heads around some of the concepts, because it is a very complex system. I just want to reiterate what you said about the revocation part of the script. So that's the mechanism by where if Max decides, like say for example, I open the channel with Max for the 1 million Satoshis, and then I pay Max, all of them. I give him 1 million. There's that motivation for me then to just broadcast the oldest commitment transaction, which would pay me out the million Satoshis, rather than to Max. So it's like, if you think about it as funding transaction, commitment transaction 1, commitment transaction 2. Commitment transaction 1 is the one that pays me the 1 million. But then when we update that, that's when I give Max the secret for the revocation on that first commitment transaction. And then we agree to the second one. So now Max is sure that if I ever try to broadcast this old one, then he can use that revocation key to basically steal all the money. So there's really a very big incentive for both of us to act honestly. And I was watching a presentation by Taj Dryja, who I think was the Dryja who was co-author on the Lightning Network white paper. But he was talking about how he thinks, there's a chance that there might never be an attempted steal from the Lightning Network, because it's such a big incentive not to, because there's a very high chance that if you try to steal the funds and broadcast the old state, you're probably losing everything. And the other thing is that this is part of why you need your node to be online, monitoring the blockchain, making sure that no old states have been broadcast. But there's a thing called watchtowers where you can actually incentivize a third party to watch over the blockchain for you. And if they see any old states being broadcast, they're actually able to broadcast the transaction with your revocation key. So, for example, it would pay out. The thief would get none. You would get, say, 95% of it, and then the watchtower would get like a 5% fee for watching for you. So there's different types of incentives and mechanisms where we can, really try to minimize the likelihood of someone broadcasting the old state. And another thing in that presentation that Taj gave was basically, as long as you have one honest node on the network, on the blockchain, watching for these old states, you could actually have everyone, give that honest node a copy of, the old, what to watch out for, basically. And so in that case, it's like, as long as you have one honest node being a watchtower, he can watch for literally every single Lightning node out there. So it's a very secure way to make a payment.
Yes, very well put. But it is really important to realize this difference, because it is a crucial one, and it is regarding your security, like your financial security. And that is the difference between the, let's say, passive defense of the blockchain and the active defense of the Lightning Network. When you have funds on the Bitcoin blockchain, then you only have your Bitcoin private key. That is a regular elliptical curve digital signature algorithm, a private key, a random number. And you can use this large random number in a hierarchical deterministic structure, so that with one giant random number, you can have unlimited number of private keys, right? And this one large giant number is your private key, your mnemonic seed. And that is, or can be described out into 12 or 24 English words. Right? That's how you can back up your private key. And further, only with this master mnemonic seed, with this hierarchical deterministic seed, only with that can you create a valid signature of or with this key that corresponds to the public key. And with this signature, you could sign then a transaction that would be recognized as a valid transaction, spending an unspent transaction output in the most current blockchain, right? So with the on-chain funds, you need to be active in order to create a valid signature. And only then does the state of the UTXO set change. Only with the active creation of a signature. Right, so you have to be active in order that you could lose funds out of a script, right? That the funds will be moved. Something active has to occur with the private key. But with the Lightning Network, this means that, or because you have this revocation secret, right? That someone else could spend a old state of this commitment transaction, right? A old state of the Lightning payment channel. And when this would be published, you have to become active and tell the rest of the network that it is invalid, that it is in fact a old part of of this commitments transaction. And then with you being active, it is a fundamental different security model, right? You need to react in order to defend yourself. As with on-chain funds, you only have to keep the secret. And stay passive, so to say. So this is a huge difference in the role that you have to play in order to defend yourself. But as long as you're running your own Bitcoin full node, you should be fine, because that is going to be online all the time as well, right? So that is good. And then, as you brought up, Italy, all these watchtowers that would allow for anyone to encrypted and privately watch over each other. So you would not know whom or what payment channel you are actually watching as a watchtower. Neither between which nodes, nor how many funds you are actually watching over. You just have a ciphertext that will turn out to be or usable with or that turns out to be clear as soon as the breach remedy transaction is published, right? So the watchtower only knows who he's guarding as soon as that person is being attacked, not beforehand. And only then does he get paid as well. So I would probably agree that it is kind of likely to that we might not see many breaches at all. But Billy, there's then also the L2 protocol, a update to the protocol layer. And how does that change the entire system?
I actually haven't read the L2 paper yet, and I have a light understanding of it, that it's the main change it makes is basically theoretically in the future you could take out this commitment transaction method of updating state and plug in L2 as a new update mechanism, but I don't actually know what the mechanism is like under the hood.
Well, the thing is, I'm not expert in this either, and it's definitely really a complex thing. But as you said, the cool thing with Lightning is that it is, again, an entire development stack. So we can now plug out the current Lightning payment channel update mechanism as we have it currently with this revocation secret, so that you have to be active to defend yourself. And we can change that into something like the L2 protocol, which was developed upon others by Christian Decker. And the cool thing here is that you can cryptographically prove that a old state is no longer spendable on the main blockchain. And because it is no longer spendable under the main consensus of the Bitcoin blockchain, then nobody could publish this old state successfully. And because nobody can publish a old state, then this means that you no longer have to defend it if it is the wrong one. Right, with the current Lightning Network update mechanism, a old state is still valid on the blockchain. It can still be published. That's why you need to actively tell the network that it's wrong, right? But with L2, it's the old channel state is on the base layer blockchain consensus a invalid transaction, and therefore you no longer need to be actively defending it. So that is quite interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm trying to think of how they might do that invalidation without actually interacting with the base layer blockchain, but I definitely plan on giving that paper a read now because it's more interesting than I thought. I think it requires a soft fork to bring in some new opcodes, if I'm not mistaken. So it wouldn't be quite ready to go today. But my guess is that, like a lot of these things, the work and the research is being done before these new opcodes come in, so that once it's actually implemented in Bitcoin, they're ready to go, ready to be used. So it will be interesting to see what comes out of the L2, protocol. Just one thing I wanted to, before we leave what we were talking about before, the watchtowers and stuff, one thing I wanted to clear up for anyone listening that might not be aware, all of these ideas of needing to watch the blockchain and actively defend against attacks or watchtowers, all of these things, it's all still automated in the software that the Lightning implementations, have. So it's not like you would have to actually watch the blockchain every few days, right? It's like, if you're running your node and someone tries to broadcast the old state, right away your node's going to say, hold on, that's not right, and then go, use the revocation key to get your money. And that's how basically like all of these things in Lightning work. It's all under the hood, other than channel management, which we're going to get into, which eventually may or may not, be all automated as well. But in terms of like enforcing rules and things like that, it's all automatic. So it really is as simple as using just a regular Bitcoin wallet, scanning a QR code and clicking OK to make your payment. There's not really, aside from opening and managing channels, there's not really any added complexity to using Lightning Network instead. And about the security model that you were talking about, I just wanted to clear up that when I said it's a very secure way to make a payment, it's nowhere near as secure as a Bitcoin payment. Those are like, you know, especially once you get like 100 confirmations deep, it's a very expensive attack to get that kind of unburied and change something. To the point where it gets almost impossible. Whereas with Lightning Network, there are potential ways that you could get, lose funds that you couldn't lose with a Bitcoin transaction. But at the same time, we're using Lightning for, buying a cup of coffee or, a $20 t-shirt or, so it doesn't make sense for someone to come along and make an expensive attack to steal your coffee. Whereas like if you were storing your life savings on there, it's a different story.
Yes, we're kind of let's say braggy or really not grateful that we're using the most indestructible database with the most well-written piece of software that humankind has ever seen, and we're using it for on-chain payments of a couple satoshis to pay a coffee. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's overkill. We're shipping a small little letter, right? A single piece of paper letter with a giant container ship. That's the scale that we have here of security versus value being transmitted. I would be comfortable settling several thousand Bitcoin in a single transaction on the blockchain. But I still use it if I want to transact maybe a couple thousand Satoshis, right? So the Lightning Network is definitely a trade-off. It is less secure compared to the indestructible Bitcoin blockchain, yes. But it still is really, really secure. And as you said, the trade-offs and the costs for an attacker are extremely high. Especially then as you have a really old node, right? The confirmation, the on-chain confirmation of the funding transaction of your payment channel was now, 30,000 blocks ago. A 30,000 block reorganization attack is never going to happen. Like never ever. Right? So this is very much a very secure payment protocol and a censorship resistant one. Nobody can stop you from opening a Lightning Network channel. Nobody can stop you from changing the commitment transaction and updating the current state. Nobody can stop you from closing the channel. So it really is a really secure, really censorship resistant payment.
Yeah, definitely. And it does share a lot of the censorship resistant properties that Bitcoin has, like the Bitcoin base layer has, because, Lightning is just like a really creative way of, signing these real Bitcoin transactions and passing them back and forth without actually broadcasting them to the network, unless you have to. But like, for example, with Bitcoin, there's the Blockstream satellite, which sends Bitcoin blocks from outer space. As far as I know, there's no reason that we couldn't have some kind of mesh network, Lightning Network, subnet or whatever, where like the channel communications, the peer-to-peer gossiping and stuff happens totally off the internet, just between, radio communications or something, right? So a lot of the ways that could be potential attack vectors on Lightning are the same types of things that are attack vectors on Bitcoin. There really isn't that much unique to attacking Lightning Network.
Yes, Lightning Network is Bitcoin, right? It's a smart way of using Bitcoin, but after all, it is still the same network. We are just taking some different parts of it, right? We're adding some new parts to the stack, which is the entire Bitcoin experience, so to say. Right? And the important thing is that we have the same base sound money, right? This is the same monetary network. We're not changing that. But what we are changing is the security network, right? The trade-offs that we're doing here, the communications network. There's some additional communication happening on the Lightning Network. We're changing the payment, the transaction layer with like individual client-side state-based consensus and not global node-based consensus. And you're right, we're then changing again also some of this cryptographic security assumptions, right, with some other macaroons and whatnot, access rights, stuff like this. So it right there, it is different in some aspects, but it is the same monetary network on others. And that's why it's so interesting, right? We can experiment a lot with this stuff here while still staying in accordance to monetary consensus of the sound money Bitcoin, which is why we don't need all these shitcoins, right? But maybe though to take this a little bit back to the funding of these payment channels, right? Right now we have a single funded payment channel. For example, when I want to open up channel to Billy, I will fund the entire site, right? Only I will provide inputs to fund the script of two multi-sig plus the other conditions, and he will not fund any of this. So then the commit or the funding transaction will have a state of the payment channel of 1 million satoshis to 0 for Billy, and then the first payment have to be made from my side, right? I have to make the first update transaction, the first commitment transaction over the Lightning Network and send payments to Billy, and only then can he change the current state back so that he has less. So only once I send money to Billy, he can send money back, right? And Billy, how is this approach used today, and what would be changes to the protocol with dual funded channels when they are coming in the near future?
So my understanding of the single funded versus dual funded is that, and this I'm not certain on this, but I think it might just be something to do with like simplicity of developing out the implementations. From a technical perspective, I don't think a lot would change. Instead of having one funder with all of the funds, your Bitcoin transaction right now has one input, your transaction, and then the output is your change and your multi-sig, right? So the way I see it is that now you would just have two inputs in your transaction and then those same two outputs, but with your commitment transaction now just having a different initial state. And I think that I feel like it wouldn't be too much to change the protocol to allow for dual funded channels. And I like the original Lightning white paper was actually written around dual funded channels. It didn't even talk about single funded channels. But like I say, I think it was like a simplicity thing. Like there's only a limited amount of developer resources available, especially at the protocol level. There's a very small number of people who can actually build this stuff. So they have to prioritize like what gets developed next. But yeah, the way it's being used now, it's a little bit of a hindrance. Like when you're operating a node, especially a node that you want to be a routing node, really a big thing is channel balance. Like, and what I mean by that is balanced channels, right? You don't want all of your capacity to be outbound with no inbound capacity, right? Because then you could make a lot of payments, but you couldn't receive any payments, which means no one could route through you. One example is I wanted to open a 2 million Satoshi channel with a friend, and the only way that we could do it with like an initial balance of 1 million Satoshis on either side was that he had to send me 1 million Satoshis on chain, on the main chain. And then I opened up a 2 million Satoshi channel to him, and then he sent me an invoice for 1 million, so I paid him, and then we had 1 million on each side. But it would have been a lot more simple if we could do dual funded channels. And the other thing is this only worked because, this is a guy that trusts me to not run off with his 1 million Satoshis. And of course, when you're working with Bitcoin, you don't want to be trusting people. So there's definite solutions that are, going to be developed that will allow for dual funded channels. I think you were mentioning something about like a Telegram chat for liquidity pool, something like that. So I would imagine that it wouldn't be too hard to do something like that. Write some code that does it atomically, where a bunch of you lock Satoshis into some contract, and then that contract opens channels on your behalf atomically, so that either A opens to B and B opens to C and C opens back to A, or none of it goes through. I think that these types of solutions will be built out eventually. It's just like I say, there's that limit of how many developer resources there are out there right now.
Yes, I agree that there are still and not enough developers working on this, but still, right, we are making tremendous progress, and we have many theoretical solutions to all the quote-unquote real problems that we see right now, and this funding is definitely one of them. But and you described it perfectly, right? And I would add though that it seems like it's a major problem when we focus only on one single payment channel, right? When only we two would have only our two nodes would only have one single payment channel. Then yes, if I open 1 million Satoshis and you have nothing, then this means that you only have inbound liquidity. This means you cannot send funds, and I only have outbound liquidity. This means I can only send funds and not receive money. And this is a not optimal situation for both of us. If we only have this one payment channel on both of our nodes. However, that's not how Lightning Network works. You're going to have several payment channels, right? Because you want to be connected to the entire network. You want to be the network. And that means not just one connection, but several of them. And then, for example, when I provide inbound capacity to Billy, this means I fund the 1 million payment channel to him. But then I turn around and to Thomas Mad Bitcoins from the World Crypto Network, he opens a payment channel with me, right? And he does let's say a 2 million funding transaction. And so all of a sudden, my node has outbound capacity through the route through Billy of 1 million Satoshi, and inbound capacity through the route of Mad Bitcoins of 2 million Satoshis. And now in general, my payment channel itself, my entire node itself is very well balanced. And that's something that I've experienced here with my node as well, because this one is rather recently set up now with new apartment and everything. And this means I had to reopen a bunch of channels. And I have not yet made too many payments, maybe a couple hundred or 1,000. So not too many compared in Lightning terms, right? Where you can do thousands of transactions per second. But still, I have a pretty well-balanced node because I have several inbound and outbound channels where I was on both sides of sending and receiving money in the Lightning channel. So this is something that we have to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's exactly what I was getting at with hopefully, and I've considered trying to make a solution for it, but I'm, again, not a software developer. But it would be cool to see some kind of like trustless solution where A, B, and C all lock funds in, and it automatically makes A open to B, B open to C, C open to A. Because that would give you that inbound and outbound balance. Even though each channel is unbalanced, your node total capacity would be balanced. And of course, it wouldn't be limited to A, B, and C. You could have all kinds of different topologies that you use to define that. That's definitely kind of my biggest interest right now with Lightning, is like just the channel management in general is something that's fascinating, and it's something that's really important because, you know, you already see like there are these there are these big you know, hubs like the Yal's node or Pierre Rochard's node, and I think that, you know, working on a way to get the more, you know, like average Joe's routing node to have that connectivity and liquidity in a way that benefits them, but also benefits the network. Because of course, if you have just like these central hubs and one of those hubs goes down, then people are going to be trying to route payments through there, and, you know, they're going to have trouble. So in my opinion, the more we can build out kind of channel management solutions for everyone, not just these kind of super nodes, I think that will be a really valuable thing to bring to the you know, the ecosystem, I guess.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I'd like to point out here a great talk by Alex Brosworth here on Lightning Channel Management at the Chain Code Labs residency a couple of blocks ago here, November 8th, 2018. And he was talking right here at a couple minutes in how important it is to not connect to the most well-connected nodes on the network. Because if you are connecting to his node, the yawns.org node, as you said, the Pierre Rochard's node launcher or a Lightning Network power user node, then you connect to someone who is already very well connected. And his need for liquidity is going to be marginally lower than that of a not so well connected node. And this means that you will have problems, or that the demand from this peer to use your channel is not going to be too high, right? So he will not use it for routing, and therefore you cannot make fees in in Lightning Network, right? So your liquidity lies idle and is not being used, quote unquote. So it might not always be the best choice to connect only to a well-connected node. It's definitely worth to connect with one or two payment channels in your entire entire Lightning Network node, to, for example, Yalls or Blockstream or some of the big names, quoting the Lightning celebrities, so to say, and then, though, with several other payment channels, still connect to those that are less well connected, to kind of help them out, right? Be a good peer on the network, both to making the network more resilient, but also from the point of view that you want your liquidity to being used because you earn something with it as well.
Yeah, and you make a good point about, you know, thinking about these things in terms of benefiting the network as a whole, because we want the Lightning Network to be healthy and you know, to work the way it's designed to work. But we also need to think about it in the way that not only does it help the network, but it helps the individual node operator. Because again, in Bitcoin, you know, you got to use the consider everyone's selfish actions, and what Max just said, you know, it definitely backs that up. Like you want to not just connect to these celebrities, Lightning celebrities, because that can also hurt you if that's your only kind of connections. So yeah, so it's important to open channels with kind of medium-sized nodes, you could say, for your own good. It's not just, you're not just being selfless and altruistic in helping the network. It really is benefiting you more than going about it the other way. And one thing that I want to back up that Max was just saying is that the Alex Bosworth video on channel management, that is, as far as I can tell, that is by far the best resource on Lightning channel management that there is. Alex is the, like, kind of, at least in terms of public facing people, he's kind of the leading person on channel management. Tweets a lot about different kind of thought experiments around channels and like submarine swaps and different things like that. But yeah, he's really, really smart when it comes to channel management. And that 30-minute video is just phenomenal. It gives you so many things to think about in terms of your own node and in your own channel management. And some of his points are not necessarily like, this is fact, this is the objective way to run a node, but it just gets you thinking about the right things. Like one of his opinions is that you should actually charge higher fees for routing, so that okay, like if someone's willing to pay this higher fee to route through my node, that means that they must really need it. So that makes him pay more attention to those specific channels. Whereas like a lot of people right now, myself included, we start our channels with like a low routing fee. And this is because the way things are set up right now, the nodes, if they're looking to route a payment, they say, okay, I'm gonna try to jump from like, find the cheapest path, the lowest fee path to get there. So we set a low fee so that they'll bounce through us. But yeah, Alex talks about how like maybe you should have a higher fee, because then that'll give you like a signal that, okay, this is a valuable channel for people to be using.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And not just Alex's talk here is phenomenal. The entire Chain Code Labs residency is absolutely a joy to behold, and definitely worth checking out. So Chain Code Lab residency, and then also you can apply now to the next Chain Code Labs residency right here. I'll put the link in the description. And if you want to develop on Lightning Network, it's definitely really worth checking out. And you really should see what this is all up about. And one further thing here with Alex, yes, follow him on Twitter. I would even go further. Alex is worth this feature right here, the little allow notification button. Because then you will get a pop-up notification on your phone every time that this man spits out amazing knowledge on Twitter. It's definitely absolutely worth it. Every single tweet is very, very compelling and really worth checking out, because, well, it is cutting edge technology here, right? And we are all experiencing this new flow of, or this new way of doing cash flow management. And he is someone that knows what's up and that is very very wise in Lightning Network stuff. So definitely check him out. And then though I further would like to point out right here a video that René Picard just published a couple days ago, yesterday, or the day before yesterday, on how to earn Bitcoin with Lightning Network routing fees. And he combines this with a little data science. So he's both Lightning developer and data scientist. And what he shows here is that actually most nodes are charging 1,000 Satoshi or milli-Satoshi space rate fee for every routed payment. And this is the vast majority of nodes that actually do this. And this is so far the smartest decision, because in aggregate, these peers make the most money compared to others. There is here a little bit more at 1,500 base rate and a tiny bit more at 2,000. But the absolute vast amount is or set their routing fees here at 1,000 Satoshis or milli-Satoshis. So fascinating science here on what is actually being applied in cyberspace here, in the real main network, with real liquidity and real money. So what do you think about this here, that most of the people charge very successfully 1,000 milli-Satoshi space rate fee?
So I don't know if he showed it in that video or if it was just in a tweet that he did, but he was talking about how the vast majority of nodes are running 1,000 milli-Satoshi base fee. I think a large part of that is I think that's the default that both C Lightning and LND ship with. But he showed that it was all theoretical through like experiment calculations. But he basically simulated a bunch of payments through the kind of current version of the current state of the Lightning Network. And he adjusted the parameter of, sorry, the motion activated light keeps going out. So anyway, he adjusted the parameter for base fee from like, I don't know, 100 to like 3,000 millisatoshis or something, just to get an estimate of what each base rate fee would get him in fees over X number of payments. And he found that like just under 500 millisatoshis was like the sweet spot. If you were charging, 100 millisatoshis, then sure, you'll get payments, but they're not going to give you much in fees. And then if you're charging like 2,000 millisatoshis, then no one's going to route through you, or fewer are going to route through you. But yeah, he found that like at around 500 millisatoshis, that's the point where you're, getting enough people to route through you, that it's making it worth it to trade off, like to lower your base fee. And I actually, following that, I lowered mine to like just below 500 a couple days ago, and I only have like 7 or 8 channels right now, so I don't route very much. But all of a sudden, it's just like, like I think I had 1 route before that, and then the next day, like after I changed it, there's a couple more routes like right there. So yeah, very much saw the results with my own eyes, I guess.
Right? Isn't that amazing? We're learning by doing. We're actually experimenting here on what the best is. And it's not just a technical question, right, of what settings in the config file we want to use, but it's very much an economic one, right? We are discovering the price of liquidity here. That is fascinating, right? You have locked up some satoshis in this payment channel, right? You provide this liquidity with the fast payment protocol of the Lightning Network, at the risk of your funds being stolen, and at the opportunity cost of doing other on-chain payments in other payment channels, or maybe even other second layer scaling solutions. So there are many different costs involved in the Lightning Network, and we can experience what the right costs are. And how do we do that? By going into the Agora, by going onto the marketplace and bartering, right? And we do that with Bitcoin by announcing the fee of our payment channels. And you can do this with the lncli command, lncli, what was it? Update channel policy, or update channel info, I think. And then you can change your fee per payment channel. And again, when you do that, you are changing the offer to other peers on the network for the service of providing liquidity. And when you realize that your price is too low, that there will be too much demand from others to route through your network, and maybe you're not going to have too much liquidity for your own, then you will have to increase the price, right? And that is being done by not just you, but by all the free individual nodes on the network. And because everyone is somehow trying to figure this out, what we're going to somehow end up with is the spontaneous order, this catalepsy of a consensus, somewhat a market price of the liquidity provided in the Lightning Network. And that is fantastic. It's so interesting on how this will work. Do you think that we can say that this is a interest, or what is this routing fee?
Yeah, I agree with like everything you just said, and it is interesting that from an economic perspective, you've got someone like Alex Bosworth saying like, increase the fee, make it 2 or 3 satoshis, and then you've got people like me who are saying like, screw the economics, I just want to route payments. This is fun, cool technology. So like at the moment, all of the node operators are basically, subsidizing, bootstrapping the Lightning Network. It's kind of analogous to like the early Bitcoin miners who like, they weren't earning anything in doing so. They were spending money to run their nodes, but they were doing it because it was cool. And now with the Lightning Network, we're doing the same thing. We're spending our own money, however much electricity we use, and opportunity costs we use for locking up our Bitcoins. You know, we're spending that money to help route payments, but it will come to a point, I think, where you know, the novelty will wear off, and you won't necessarily have that subsidy from, you know, the nerds like us who just, you know, want to be part of this kind of movement, I guess. And I think at that point, and we're still probably, you know, a few years from that point, but I think you will really start to see the fees converge on, like, you know, what is the actual value of routing a payment. But I do think for the next couple of years, we won't know the true value, because we will still see it being subsidized, especially, like, you know, my computer's on 24/7 anyway, so, like, really it's just the opportunity cost. And my Bitcoins would not be spent otherwise. So really the only cost to me is this, you know, increased risk by running a hot wallet. But I wouldn't normally just do that for free or for no reason. But I'm willing to with, you know, the Lightning Network, because again, it's this cool movement, this cool new technology that I want to be a part of. And who knows, maybe down the road, if I get this really well connected, reliable node, and, you know, the Federal Reserve stocks up on Bitcoin as a reserve currency, maybe it'll pay off in 50 years. Who knows? Yeah, I do think that it'll take a few years for the real price of a routing payment to come to light.
Oh, that's awesome. I've never really thought about the Lightning Network liquidity providers as miners, but the analogy holds up quite nicely. They are the very early adopters who are in it for the tech mainly, and for tinkering around with it, right? For just experiencing how it actually works. And then out of this, an entire new industry arises, right? Because we have this new tool, because we have the tool, so many new things are possible. Because these things are possible, because we humans with our imagination and ingenuity make them possible, we can go out and fulfill these tasks as entrepreneurs. And that is awesome. So we are building here entire new marketplaces, new agoras, in which we can then exchange our goods and services for, and everything peaceful. It's beautiful how a Lightning Network increases the depth of the marketplace that Bitcoin provides. And I agree that, right, when you have a dedicated always on device, like for example here the Nodl, you could have, right, go a bit smaller, Raspberry Pi, and that thing costs $100, all the hardware not even $70, and then you're going to put the Raspberry Blitz on there, and then done, right? You have for $100 plus some on-chain fees, and you can have your financial battle station up and running. That's awesome. Invest a little bit more for a little bit better hardware, like 0.12 Bitcoin or something, and then you can get a Nodl and have a really powerful Bitcoin battle station, right? With Bitcoin D, LND, BTC Pay server, and all that good stuff. But when you do these investments, or you just take an old laptop, right? As many others do as well. Why not? Right? But then once you have occurred these one-time costs, the ongoing costs are pretty trivial. Yes, electricity, but well, that's almost nothing. And then the other is mainly the opportunity cost. So it's quite interesting how this will work out in the long run, and how supply and demand will work out.
Yeah, it is fascinating, kind of how this is all playing out in real time, and we're able to see it evolve from, like, well, I guess if you look at the Lightning Network graph explorers, you know, through time, look back what it was a year ago, it was just like these 7 or 8 people like playing around with it, and now you've got 5,000 or more nodes that are doing exactly what you just described, right? Like, most of these node operators are, you know, just people like you and me just running a node for kicks, and you know, you've got a handful that are like businesses that are actually using them. But just kind of like what you were saying about it being really interesting to see, like, how the I don't know, the economics of it, and I guess economics and game theory play out. Like, it's transitioned from purely like out of interest eventually being the more kind of self-interest, I guess, will be what dictates the long term. Someone, Jay Lucid in the comments, just said, I guess it just needs to be much lower than on-chain transaction with regards to Lightning Network fees. And I think that's a really interesting point, because right now we look at Lightning payments like, okay, so we can send, 1 millisatoshi, which is like such a small fraction of a cent. But there's no saying that like people used to send that small amount of value with Bitcoin main chain transactions, right? So who knows? Maybe Lightning Network will turn into something that's like, okay, you can't use it to send a millisatoshi. That's stupid. Like maybe it'll just organically evolve into this thing that is used to send like, tens of thousands of satoshis as the smallest payment. Because maybe the hobbyist node operators will get bored or sick of it or whatever. And like maybe the people running nodes will be like the miners who just actually want to be earning fees and stuff. So like that free market look of things, you really might see something where like the minimum payment size on the Lightning Network is 10,000 satoshis, and the minimum fee or routing fee that you can find is like 100 satoshis. Who knows? But it is really interesting to think about it, like, especially if you back, rewind to when we started our Lightning nodes back in year and a bit ago. You've got like a $50 Bitcoin transaction or a 0.00001 Lightning transaction, right? So there doesn't have to be that big disparity. Like maybe Lightning Network will come up and maybe Bitcoin will go down, and they'll not be so far apart once things balance out.
Yes, all great points here, right? It's that you have both on-chain fees and then off-chain fees. And the thing is, when you have a long or a old Lightning Network node, then this means that you have old payment channels, right? We've opened our first payment channels a year ago, and when we would have kept them open for this entire time, do you still have your very first payment channel open?
No, I don't. I don't know if Blockstream closed it to collect the because it was pretty unbalanced for a while, right? It was like I put like $25 in there, and I paid like 24 for the T-shirt, so it was unbalanced, and I was like, my node was basically stagnant, dormant for months and months and months. So they might have closed it out, or maybe something happened where it like the node automatically closed it out. But yeah, I just started back up here, probably, I don't know, a few months ago now. I started getting back into like playing around with the channel management and stuff, and so that's why I only have 7 or 8 channels right now. Like I haven't put in the the liquidity or whatever. I haven't locked too much up yet. I've been trying to like really be mindful of who I'm opening channels with, how much I'm putting in those channels, how I'm balancing them. And so now that I'm like getting this better understanding of channel management and kind of following the same principles that we've been talking about, I'm getting to the point where it's like, okay, like I can open bigger channels, and I can very intentionally decide who I'm opening a channel to. Because the first instinct is like, let's just find these big hubs and connect to them because they're well connected. But yeah, I've been very, very slowly moving my way into it so that I can intentionally and mindfully choose those channels. But anyway, so like my oldest channel now is probably like 2 or 3 months old, which is a lot of blocks still.
Yes, it's in block time. It's an old man already. That payment channel is a senior.
Yeah.
But the thing is, right? You have the one-time opening fee, and that is a on-chain transaction fee. And when we are in ridiculously low on-chain fees as we have them right now, right? It's crazy. You can open payment channels for like 300 satoshis in total, which is insane. And then also though, once you have them open, you can make unlimited amounts of off-chain transactions. And let's say that you make 100, well, okay, let's say 10,000 transactions. then all of a sudden, once you close it, then you have, let's say, another 10 or another 1,000 satoshis of fees. Then in total, the off-chain fees will be much higher than the on-chain fees, right? Because you will have many, many more commitment or routing fees that you will have had paid. So it's not even necessarily that on-chain fees will be higher. It's just that they will be amortized over a much larger distance. We will consolidate a large amount of transactions out of the base layer and into, we will consolidate many second layer transactions into only one single layer transaction on the base layer. And thus, I don't really think that we can compare these routing or the on-chain and off-chain fees that much, because, for example, then on the other hand, just recently I've quite falsely I opened a channel with a wrong amount. I did an off by one error, so it was one order of magnitude. Instead of 1 million satoshis, only 100,000 satoshis. Didn't want to have that, so I tried myself with some splicing, right? And again, here that would be something else to then do. Rebalancing with on-chain transactions, however, do this really efficiently so that you don't waste too much on-chain space. So there are still many different tactics that we can use. And now, maybe Billy, could you go a bit into what splicing can do exactly?
Sure. So this is another topic that I'm not super familiar with. Again, like what I was talking about at the start of our conversation, how a lot of these types of developments are getting implemented on the L&D side, and the C Lightning side is a bit slower on like the feature richness. So anyway, my understanding of splicing is that you are basically combining multiple of these Bitcoin transactions that are required for Lightning stuff. You're combining multiple of them into a single transaction. So like you want to close out your channel. So you and your channel counterparty, you agree to spend from the multi-sig and give each person what they're owed. But the amount that you are owed, you pay it into a new multi-signature with a new amount. You add funds, so you have multiple inputs into that transaction. So you can add the funds, and then on the output side of the transaction, you just have a higher amount going into a new multi-signature account. And so it's like the closing and the opening, the closing of the old channel and the opening of the new channel all happens with the one transaction, rather than needing to do them in separate transactions. And I think you can combine multiple, like different combinations of opening and closing through splicing, but again, it's a pretty limited understanding I have of it. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, or if I was on a different topic altogether.
No, perfect explanation, actually. And again, cutting edge, reckless stuff. So neither of us knows exactly how this works. Neither of us understands if it's the correct path to scaling the Lightning Network, or Bitcoin for that matter. So don't trust, verify, right? Do your own research and due diligence. And we're just spitballing here pretty much.
Yeah.
And so is everyone, right?
Yeah.
Even the core protocol developers have no clue what they're doing. Let's be honest. But yes, the cool thing with splicing is exactly that, is that you can combine the closing transaction of a payment channel. So the publishing or the broadcasting of the closing of a payment channel, the most recent state of this payment channel, you publish this to the entire network and you prove it with the signatures. And I think with splicing, you need to be in the cooperative case. So you will have two signatures from both me and Billy, and no hash time lock contract or revocation stuff. And then we have both of the signatures that prove that we can spend this UTXO. So we have the witness script, and this is of the most recent state. Then one of us or both of us provides another input into this transaction. And that will be the funding, another funding input to then spend later or in the same transaction output. Okay, so the transaction input that will be published to the blockchain is going to be the closing transaction of the Lightning channel and another funding of a single signature of either Billy or myself, right? So additional money being put into the smart contract. And then the output side of this transaction, the new UTXOs being created, is going to be the change address, which is not that interesting. And then the next Lightning Network payment channel, which is going to be opened in the same transaction as the last one's being closed. And it's going to be between the same Lightning Network nodes, so both that of Billy and mine, so the same public Lightning Network keys. And we are going to increase the total N value of the script. So the entire multisig will now lock up more funds than it did before. And with it, and it can be with different allocations, right? The cool thing is that with the splicing transaction, we actually commit to the most recent state of the payment channel on the blockchain. So we're kind of anchoring a copy of the most recent, so that, right, for example, we've made 100,000 off-chain transactions. We take the most recent one, we put that on the blockchain, and then we add additional funds to maybe balance it out or just increase the total capacity. And then from the same transaction, we can continue doing off-chain payments. And the really cool thing is, because both the closing and the funding transaction of these different payment channels happens in the same time within the same Bitcoin block, you do not have to stop routing Lightning Network payments. You can continue updating the same payment channel that you close and open throughout the entire process at any instance, at any second, because it is within the same Bitcoin block. And the Lightning Network doesn't know seconds; it only knows the block time, right? So splicing is something really, really cool for liquidity purposes.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I didn't realize that about still being able to route while while your splicing transaction was in the mempool. That's very interesting. One more thing to add on splicing is that you can splice funds into your channel, so that'd be adding new funds, but you can also splice funds out of your channel. So if Max had accidentally put in 10 million Satoshis instead of 1 million, then the splicing transaction would basically look like that him and I would both agree to spend, to close out the channel by spending the multi-sig funds, and then the change now would be 9 million Satoshis, and the new Lightning channel would be the 1 million that we wanted to put in. So it's cool that it works both ways as well, including if you're, maybe if you are a merchant or something and you've just got, a large amount of funds that are in the Lightning Network that you've received from payments, and you just want to, cash some of them out in order to whatever, pay your bills, put it in your pocket. You can do that and still keep whatever amount of liquidity in those channels that that you actually want to have in there. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with that, and it's very interesting, to see where that is going to head.
Yes, I agree. And the really cool thing is that depending on how much complexity you want to abstract, you can now completely disregard if it is an on-chain or an off-chain payment, because it will have the same user experience, so to say. Yes, any payment will be instant when you do it over the Lightning Network, yes. And it will take confirmations when you do it on the chain, of course. But it can be even the same QR code that you scan. So you have a QR code that, say, with an invoice of 500,000 Satoshi payment, and either automatically it uses payment channel liquidity in order to route the network through the Lightning Network. And if you do not have enough outbound capacity, then you can use some of your cold storage on-chain and increase or commit to funding the next or splicing into this payment channel, immediately getting the boost of extra outbound liquidity, and immediately committing to spending this 500,000 Satoshi Lightning Network payment, all within the same transaction, and that will all be confirmed within the same block. So this payment will go finally through as soon as you will have the first confirmation, or well, of course, regardless or how many confirmations you will want to wait before you release the funds, or well, the goods and services being paid for.
Right.
Okay, maybe another really cool thing about liquidity management, and something that, in my opinion, will be one of the most important changes, is going to be the atomic multi-path payments. So this is really, really cool. The main thing with Lightning Network is actually not the payment channels, but the routing of payments. So let's assume that we have 5 individuals, A, B, C, D, and E, and each of them has one payment channel with the next partner. So A has a payment channel with B, B with C, C with D, and D with E. And now A wants to send a money or payment, a Bitcoin, to E, but they do not have a direct payment channel. And now what they can do is that E, the receiver, can request a payment and choose a little secret, the payment pre-image, the hash pre-image, and then it can construct a route going backwards, selling the pre-image to the next person. So E is going to sell the secret, the pre-image, to D, then D is going to sell the pre-image to C, C is going to sell the pre-image to B, and B is going to sell the pre-image to to A. And thus, when everything happens atomically, this will mean that all these payments will go through, and eventually A will have sent money to E through these 4 different hops. So that's really basically how Lightning Network payment or routing payments work. But you notice that there is one invoice generated by E and only one path throughout the entire network. And the main bottleneck here is that peer on the routing path, which has the lowest liquidity, either inbound or outbound. Okay, so the total capacity of the node here is of interest, both inbound and outbound. And then this then also means, right, that we have to make sure that we have enough funds in our channels, in our nodes. And the cool thing then with atomic multi-path payments is that we can have, again, the network with A, B, C, D, E, but then we also have a second route of F, G, H, I. And so E, the receiver, can generate a secret, right, the payment pre-image, and it can construct 2 different routes from A to E, so that we can have a lower liquidity in the individual nodes. But because we send the payment across several routes, a larger payment can be sent in a way that either the entire payment goes through or it does not go through at all. So atomic multipath payments give us more liquidity spread over more routes in the Lightning Network payment or network. What are your thoughts on atomic path payments?
I'm really excited for them. I think that it's going to, have a huge impact on what, how many paths there are to get, your payment through. One example is just this kind of Lightning Network trust chain that's been going on. Right now, it's close to 3 million Satoshis, and basically each person adds 10,000 Satoshis to the total and makes a Lightning payment to someone else. And then the person that receives it adds 10,000 and they pay it forward to someone else. So that's what the trust chain is. But it's up to 3 million or so Satoshis now. And there's been a lot of incidents since it got over like 2 million where someone will, okay, I'm going to pass the torch on to this person. And they're talking back and forth on Twitter, trying to like, okay, here's my invoice, and then they'll try 3 different ways to pay it, and they just can't find a path. There's the light. So yeah, they can't find a path to get to the get that big of a payment through to the end person. And people are talking like, well, I've got 3 channels with 3 million satoshis outbound, and then the recipient says, oh, well, I've got 3 channels with 3 million satoshis inbound, so like, why isn't this working? But it's because those intermediate nodes don't have that much liquidity. So with the atomic multipath payments, it's going to be really exciting to see that problem disappear, because any one of those routes, like, it can split from 3 million into 3 separate 1 million Satoshi channels, and then converge back into the 3 million on the other end, or come in to the other end on multiple channels. And it's interesting because right now people are focusing on opening fairly large payment channels so that they can route small and big payments through. But once the atomic multipath payments are implemented, it might reverse things so that it makes more sense. Instead of having 3 million Satoshi channel, you might want 10, 300,000 Satoshi channels, because you're still able to route the 3 million through. The only difference is, in that case, you might be doing 5 or 10 Satoshi fee instead of a 1 Satoshi fee. But yeah, I think you might see it change from this like high demand for big channels to that not really being that important anymore. Especially because like 3 million Satoshis is what, like 100 or 150 bucks. So there's not going to be too many payments that are much bigger than that on the Lightning Network, I don't think. Or at least not in the near term.
Yes, I agree that AMP is really going to be this kicker that is really important. And it's almost here, 2 weeks, and it's going to be released. And the really fantastic thing is that it increases your overall capacity to send and receive payments drastically. Because, right, for example, I think a really good way of funding your Lightning Network node is with Wasabi CoinJoin UTXO. Right, so you're gonna get a Schnorr blind signature, zero link, coin join privacy UTXO, which has a value of 0.1, so 10 million satoshis, and that is you're going to fund your Lightning Network node with. That's at the current moment like 300, 400 euros or dollars, so decent amount for a hot wallet, right? Wouldn't do much more. And then the question is, how many channels, with whom, of how much value are you going to open up? And right, currently, if you say that I want to have 5 channels of each 0.02 Bitcoin, so 2 million Satoshis, then your maximum payment at the current amount will be 2 million Satoshis, right? And that's, well, I mean, it's 60 bucks, not too bad, but still, it is limited because you have put 200 or, well, 10 million Satoshis in total, right? And then the cool thing with AMP is that, currently, I would then much rather open, let's say, one payment channel that is, let's say, 5 million Satoshis, right? And you open this with a really well-connected node, for example, yalts.org. And this means that you personally have outbound capacity of 5 million Satoshis to pretty much anyone in the network, because yalts.org is such a well-connected node. And then you only have 5 more million Bitcoin left, but you want to have more payment channels. So now you're going to decrease the overall value of the payment channels that you open. So maybe you're going then to open with the Akin node, another one of the really well-connected nodes. For example, you open 2 million Satoshis. And then in total, you have already 7 million Satoshis to very well-connected nodes. And then you can open, let's say, 6 more of each, what is then 6 more of each 500,000 Satoshis. And you do that to a bunch of your friends, right? Those that you will send and receive payments regularly, and those that you semi-trust. And then you have kind of this Pareto distribution of funds allocation to the different payment channels. And you can send to many different peers because you have the one large payment channel with a bunch of outbound liquidity to a well-connected node. But you also have smaller payment channels to enough other peers on the network so that you can send to pretty much anyone, especially the smaller payments. So I think that at the current moment, something like this is quite interesting, right? It gives you both the benefits of having a large liquidity in this one channel, but still a well-connected node overall. Billy, what's your strategy for opening funds?
So the kind of, I try to look at, the node that I'm opening a channel with. I try to look at, what does their peripheral network look like? I don't want to just go on, 1ml.com and see, okay, this node has, 5 Bitcoins of capacity with like 200 channels. Sure, I'll open with them. I like to look for good, healthy nodes that have like a good amount of uptime, but then look to what nodes they're connected to see like, is this channel just gonna keep me on this little corner of the network? Or, maybe I'll open a couple here, but then like a couple here, a couple here, a couple here, to really try to connect with all those other nodes on the different ends of the network. You really want to be able to, within 1 or 2 hops, you want to be able to hit most parts of the network. So yeah, I really look for like what their peripheral networks look like. And of course I look for like, if they're, high uptime or like reliable nodes, make sure that they don't just, before AMP, make sure that they don't just have a bunch of tiny channels. But with AMP, of course, that's not going to be as big of a deal. Like you said before, the real bottleneck in routing a payment is that single node in the middle with the lowest liquidity. And what it really comes down to is, out of their inbound and outbound liquidity, whichever of those two is lower, like that's your limit right now. So you might have 5 nodes in a path that all have in total, a lot of liquidity. But if one of them has like 3 million Satoshis outbound and 100,000 Satoshis inbound, then they are, really the capacity along that path is only 100,000 Satoshis. Of course, you can't really, you don't know what the state of that channel is, right? You don't know how lopsided it is. But, one thing is like connecting with nodes that are operated by people that are actively trying to stay balanced. It's like you could just open with a bunch of anonymous nodes, or you could open with someone like Alex Bosworth or Max, or someone, maybe not Alex with the super big node, but someone that is going to be actively like curating their channels, taking good care of them, closing out bad channels, opening good channels. So that's a big thing, is like the actual node operator plays a big part in choosing who to open a channel with, because you are locking up, your Bitcoin, and you're putting it in a hot wallet. So you want to get the most out of it, and you want to, put it in the hands of people that you think are going to treat it well.
Oh, yes, exactly. Right there. Yes, Lightning Network can be used completely trustless, right? It can be used even in the most malicious of environments. But still, this is not a completely an anonymous network, right? We still have attribution to the individual node and the actions across time of this one individual node. So, for example, the node of yalls.org, although it is pseudonymous, right? We know the owner behind it. We know it's Alex Brosworth, and we know that he knows his shit and that he is one of the smartest peers that we have here in this network. So this can build up a lot of trust and a lot of, let's say, or knowledge that the skills of the peers are sufficient, right? And it's not just the know-how of how to have or how to allocate or how to balance the channel well, right? Although that is a big part. It's also something like the hardware, right? Are you running on a phone, right? Do you have the Eclair mobile wallet up and running? I mean, it's good for spending, but it's not good for routing, right? You're not going to be online all the time with your mobile wallet. So if you have this type of hardware, you're not going to be a reliable routing node. If you have a Raspberry Pi, yeah, it's better. But I mean, right, it's a $30 board. It's not that resilient, especially with a lot of communication. So the chances that it does go down is a bit higher. Something like the Nodl, it's a bit of a better board, right? It will cost like $300 hardware, yes, but still, it's nothing compared to a server, right? A really high quality full node that is resilient, that maybe has different virtual machines or different instances of the same wallet checking each other or whatnot, right? You can always have different redundancy mechanisms and hardware improvements to the node itself. And the higher the uptime is of the node and the more reliant this node is, the more valuable it is as a peer on your network. And these are all the nuances that we still have to figure out. I have no clue if it's more efficient to connect to a high quality server as your routing peer or to a Raspberry Pi, right? If there are actually like real differences or if it's just hypothetical. But I would argue that more reliant hardware leads to an overall more reliant Lightning Network node. And that is something that we also have to further consider. I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I haven't used the Raspberry Pis myself, so I can't speak to how reliable they are. I mean, of course, they've got a good reputation and whatnot, but I mean, for whatever they are, $60 computer, you generally get what you pay for. So I would agree that someone who's running like a dedicated server for their Lightning node is probably going to be a more reliable node in general. In terms of like, at any given moment, if you are trying to route through a Raspberry Pi versus a server, I would say that there's probably not a huge difference. Maybe if you get to the point where you're dealing with payments that need to be as instant as possible, then there could be some performance trade-offs there. But in general, just for making a fast payment, I'd say they're pretty comparable. I mean, they run the same software, they do the same things. I think that a more powerful computer can handle more channels and stuff like that. I think I read somewhere that the Raspberry Pi starts to get a little bit overworked once you're getting hundreds of channels going. Excuse me. So
yes, I agree, and I think that it's going to be too much of a bottleneck, and especially with the numbers that we already have. Grubbles, one of the peers at Blockstream, he just recently published some of his own personal tests, and I can confirm the rough numbers here that he had within one payment channel. So two different LND client, or no, he was using C Lightning, two different C Lightning clients running on the same computer, on the same communication network, but different Lightning clients. So completely different wallets. They had they had a payment channel with each other, and they did commitment transaction updates within this payment channel. So no routing over the Lightning Network involved. It was just the commitment transaction update and the communication of the revocation secrets and all the stuff important for the channel updates. And Grubbles managed to do in 40 seconds. So really short time, 40 seconds, he managed 10,000 transactions. That's crazy, right? Yeah. That's really, really, really fast already with early beta software, right? With still 1,001 improvements to go, we already are seeing these numbers. And yes, when you're routing payments, it's different, but we're gonna get there, right? It's one block at a time. We are still building up this network. but it's here. And these are real numbers with real currency, with real sound money on the real life network. So quite fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. It is fascinating. It's one thing that I love about the Lightning Network, and it might be my favorite thing about the Lightning Network, is that it's all built around Bitcoin's consensus rules. You know, it would be really easy to, you know, build something that can make these many payments on some sort of centralized system, of course. But yeah, being able to do something like this on, you know, the hard sound money, the unforgeable, impossible to change money as you know, as your base layer, and then just like use this limited scripting language and make do with what, you know, what you're given. Just make this amazing payment network on top of it that can do something like 10,000 commitment transactions in 40 seconds. Like, it's just fascinating that that you can extend Bitcoin in such a way that just like almost infinitely increases the transaction throughput, and like, especially within an individual payment channel, you know, your security trade-off is very minor compared to what you gain from it. Like, it is fascinating.
Oh yeah, yes, it really is, right? We have so much to learn. The rabbit hole does not stop. It is crazy. It really is. Well, Billy, I really enjoyed our conversation. We covered incredible amount, and I think we had some overall great explanations. And overall, just discussing the best practices that we think are going on in channel liquidity management. Again, we have no clue. Don't trust, verify. We're just guessing here, blabbering on pretty much. Although I would say we actually both in aggregate do have quite a lot of experience here, and I think it was quite some good thoughts that we put out here. Maybe to sum it up, do you have anything else, Bill, that you want to bring up? Anything that we did not yet mention, or is something that you want to summarize?
I don't think so. I'd say I agree with you that it's, you know, a good range and a good depth of topics that we covered. And even though we don't have this like perfect expert knowledge, you know, we do have more than the average person. So it is good for us to be able to kind of share what our understanding of it is in its current state, you know, right now, and get that out to some people, and maybe help some people, you know, form their mental models around how this stuff works. So yeah, it's really nice to be able to kind of share that way. And like you said earlier, I mean, for the most part, no one knows what is going on. Like, there are so many different facets to this stuff, and nobody knows it all. So yeah, it's great to be able to kind of share what we do know, and hopefully, you know, down the road sometime we can get back together, and once we do have more of a concrete, you know, more informed knowledge of this stuff, and then we'll probably also have a very loose understanding of the new stuff then. But it'd be great to get back together and kind of go over some of the stuff in more, you know, with more informed knowledge, I guess.
Oh yes, that was fantastic. I agree. We have so much more to learn, and I think we did a good job here sharing the information that we have accumulated. And I'm eagerly awaiting to our next conversation here, where we can share the information that we will learn in the near future. Then, so awesome. A couple of things here, housekeeping. Then, first of all, I want to scroll up all the way back here to James Del Gershow, who says. First of all, thank you very much for the $2 YouTube donation. That is awesome. And he asks, is that a pit biggie on the shelf? And let's look at that. Oh, yes, it is. It is a little savings bank. Ha! Fantastic, right? You can toss your fiat shit coins right in here, which is cool. And then, even more importantly, though, is that you have, with the same piggy right here, you get a Bitcoin address that was generated here on an open dime. So here with the open dime, you can generate the address and then print it out and give this to your little kid to then store sound money Bitcoin on the open dime. And I would personally put Bitcoin on the Open Dime and put a little thank you note here in the Bit Piggy, so that you know that, for example, when Grandma is doing a Bitcoin donation to her grandson, she's going to do an on-chain transaction on the Open Dime and then put in the thank you card right in here. I think that would be nice. So definitely here, the Bit Piggy is awesome. And thank you for James for sending this to me. So this was a very kind donation from him. So thank you very much. It's actually the first physical Open Dime that I own. And now, so that is awesome. I definitely treasure it. And I like the idea, right? Teaching the next generation how to do sound money savings, which is awesome. What are your ways of saving for Bitcoin? Do you have a Bit Piggy as well?
I don't have a Bit Piggy. I couldn't afford the Satoshis to get one. You know, they all count. I got to keep them in my Lightning channels. No, I would say just you know, what you were talking about at the start of the call, like the low time preference. You know, cutting costs wherever you can. Kind of deferring today's consumption, you know, so that I can buy more Bitcoins, that kind of thing. Like just an overall lifestyle, I guess, right? Just don't spend any money that I don't need to spend.
Precisely, right? That's the cool thing. And Bitcoin incentivizes that. And again, Lightning Network is horrible. It incentivizes you to spend your precious Satoshis, which is too difficult. Piers, I also want to thank you very much here for hanging in the chat in general. It was a fun with you. Lots of people here again, all the good guys and girls here communicating and sharing information. That's awesome. Piers, you gotta follow Billy_BTC. Follow Billy Garrison here on Twitter, definitely worth. And all the good Lightning stuff here. Oh yeah, by the way, when I see this in the timeline, tip in me, now with a browser plugin, to have a one button to generate the tip in Lightning invoice in Twitter. Isn't that amazing? Fantastic. So definitely follow Billy_BTC. You can also follow myself here at Hillebrand Max. On Twitter. We talked about quite a lot. First of all, we talked about that you should follow Alex Brosworth, definitely one of the key Lightning Network talking heads, and definitely worth listening to his information that he has to share. We talked about Lightning Network routing in general and how you can accumulate daily routing fees right here, 90,000 Satoshis, or the monthly for Refear, almost 500,000 Satoshis. So quite crazy how many Satoshis you can earn by providing liquidity to your peers. We talked about this amazing presentation by Alex at the Chaincode Labs residency in New York in November about his thoughts on Lightning channel management. And definitely we've all learned, or we've both learned so much from Alex. So this talk is a must for anyone interested. Link in the description, of course. We also talked quickly about René Picard's brief video about how to earn Bitcoin with the Lightning Network routing fees and a bit data science with this. And he found out here that 1,000 millisatoshis base fee is quite common. And maybe if you can go a little below, maybe 500, maybe a bit more, then you can be right in the sweet spot where not many people or not many peers in the network are providing this low of a fee. So you will get many payments, but still you will get enough fees per payment in order to justify that. So quite interesting how we can find a free market price for all this. We then also, maybe short chilling. Oh no, let's do that at the end. We talked about splicing and how that is going to be really interesting and how this will help us to lose the differentiation between on-chain and off-chain payments and to top up and to take out of a Lightning Network payment channel quite easily with any on-chain transaction. Quite quickly here again, the Pig Toshi Nakamoto, that is the Pit Biggie here. No, sorry, Bit Piggy. We also talked about atomic multipath payments. I think one of the most interesting things coming to Lightning Network, hopefully really soon. In 2 weeks, it should be online. And this will allow us to route payments through several different routes or through several different channels to the same destination. so that we can pay larger amounts with locking the same amount of money, which is quite nice. And then, what is this? Check the connection, Nessun to uptime peer-to-peer. Oh, yeah. Well, we talked about how to find good peers to connect to. So yeah, that was pretty much it. Piers, check out my GitHub. Here's my bachelor thesis on non-simulated shared ownership of Bitcoin with multi-signatures in the Lightning Network. So basically, how can we make sure that 2 out of 3, Alice, Bob, and Charlie, need to agree before they can spend money on the Lightning Network? Quite a compelling question, and I'm writing here a little thesis on it, and hopefully we can integrate it. It's interesting, so if you want to check it out, please feel free to issue a pull request on GitHub. And then also, of course, thank you very much to all the Tallycoin contributors. That really is fantastic. We are at 380,000 Satoshis. So again, quite a couple Satoshis. And we had 3 donations yesterday, all anonymous Lightning transactions. Isn't that amazing? So thank you very much to the anonymous patrons here. And Lightning Network is just too private. I cannot even thank you in person here. Isn't that a shame? So all the sponsors here of the World Crypto Network get early access to these shows, including the current batch of Lightning Network shows that I've produced here, on including how to open and update and close Lightning Network channels. And I think that was it. I think I shilled everything that I need to shill. That's always difficult, right? To remember all the things that you want to talk about, or that we have talked about that as well. But yeah, I think we can wrap this up now. Billy, again, thank you very much. And yeah, any last words from your side?
No, thanks for having me on the show. It was great to join you and have this conversation. I learned a lot from it, and it's always great to be able to talk about this kind of thing with a like-minded person and to share our ideas with everyone. So thanks a lot for having me.
Oh, yes, I absolutely agree. It really was a great conversation to grow together. And that is absolutely what has happened here. We've shared a bunch of information. You've brought up topics that I did not know about. I've brought up topics that maybe you did not know about. And the audience chipped in as well, both, of course, accumulating this information and participating in the chat. And I think we all took away as all a little bit here. And that is fantastic. Exactly why I like these long-form discussion podcasts. So Piers, this was fantastic. I'm very much looking forward to the next shows. So see you on the next show. Bye-bye.